Have you ever been hit by a comment, an idea that knocked everything you were thinking about out of your head and then remained the only thing you could think about, the only thing you wanted to think about? That happened to me recently, just last week, in fact. I had a lovely but relatively unremarkable topic planned for the service today, and then bam, something else intruded itself, drove everything else off the field, and left me to wrestle with it as hard as Jacob was said to have wrestled with God. I wrestled through the things I couldn't do anything about and came to a place where I felt I had something to say. That's why if you came to hear me talk about the mind as an instrument of understanding, you're going to hear what I'm calling still evolving, still growing. And when I'm done, I will be able to think of other things again. But you might be left with some wrestling of your own, so be warned. Good morning. My name is Annie Foerster, and I'm minister here at First Jefferson Unitarian Universalist Church in Fort Worth, Texas. But let us soothe our minds now to get them ready for worship and wrestling by listening to this morning's prelude. Our pianist is Misha Bresnev. Today and every day, we are still evolving, still developing our inner self, which we call our spiritual self, our soul, the essence of our being. Think about our developmental process as parallel to the life cycle of an apple tree. Beginning with a small sprouting seed, it develops into a young sapling tree, then a mature tree. With good moisture, sunshine, and nourishment, it develops and grows. At the same time, it is withstanding storms and disease and drought. Each spring, the tree grows new leaves and flower buds that open into flowers. After a while, the petals fall off, and in the flower center, a tiny bump begins developing into a luscious apple. The fruit has become wholesome food for someone, and also holds within it more seeds that when planted continue the cycle of life. Likewise, we too were nourished and grew, withstood storms and drought, and hold wisdom that can nourish others both now and in future generations. Please join our singer this morning, David Bindi, in our first hymn, number 304, A Fierce Unrest. The words will be on your screen.
Fierce unrest sees at the core of all existing things. It was the eager wish to soar that gave the gods their wings. There throbs through all the worlds that are this heartbeat hot and strong, unshaken system, star by star, awake and glow in song. But for the urge of this unrest, these joyous fears are mute. But for the rebel in our breast, had we remained as brutes, when baffled lips demanded speech, speech trembled into birth. One day the lyric word shall reach from earth to laughing earth, from deed to dream, from dream to deed, from daring hope to hope. The restless wish, the instant need, still drove us up the slope. Since we no governed firmament, cold ordered regular, we sing the stinging discontent that leaps from star to star.
Please join me in reading our Chalice Lighting. It's on your screen. We pause in reverence before all intangible things that eyes see not, nor ears detect, that hands can never touch, that space cannot hold, and time cannot measure. For these we light our chalice. There's never an end to our yearning to know the unknown. After all our labor at learning, there's never an end to our trying the untried. So fling wide the windows, O my soul. The bright beams of morning are warm. We have been celebrating Chalaka since the beginning of January. Chalaka is a uniquely Unitarian Universalist Holy Day celebration that celebrates each of our principles one by one. Today, Board Secretary Mary Ann Clark is helping us celebrate the fourth principle, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning.
Happy Chalaka. Chalaka is a Unitarian celebration that is new to me, and I've been enjoying it week by week. We're celebrating this uniquely UU holiday by honoring one of our 7 principles each week. My name is Mary Ann Clark. This year I am serving as secretary at the First Jefferson Board of Trustees, and I have chosen Principle 4, the free and responsible search for truth and meaning. We repeat this principle in the affirmation every week when we say the quest for truth is our sacrament. I want to unpack this principle in 4 ways. What is truth? Why do we give it sacramental status? What is a free search? And what is a responsible search? What is truth? At the simplest level, truth is correspondence to reality. But the search for truth gets trickier when there is more than one version of reality. For aspects of reality that are easily verifiable by observation, it's simple. I don't think that anybody believes that the COVID-19 virus is a DNA virus or a prion, although there were some people who claimed that it was a fabrication and doesn't really exist at all. If you have to decide how to behave in the presence of an infectious agent, it's probably important to decide whether or not you believe it's there. We're also living in a country in which different versions of the truth have led to violence and insurrection. Sometimes truth really matters. Why do we give truth sacramental status? The dictionary definition of a sacrament is that it is a religious ritual or ceremony that imparts divine grace. If we seek the truth, God will be happy with us. A few weeks ago, Annie talked about religion for atheists. In a more secular context, if we seek the truth, we try to live in a context of reality, and we have constructed an internally consistent web of truth. That is our equivalent of divine grace, and we might make more intelligent and responsible decisions. The free search for truth means that nobody can keep me from doing it. We are both allowed and expected to ask questions of the universe and of one another. We don't just totally accept a view of reality articulated by the king or the bishop or the boss or the governor or some other figure of authority. I'm allowed to say, really? Which demands some reason to believe that whatever claim was made is in accord with reality. And that brings us to the second half of the principle, the free and responsible search for truth and meaning. To me, the responsible part of truth-seeking means that when I want information about something, I should pick a reliable source. That probably means not Facebook or Twitter. This doesn't mean that stuff you might read on those places is necessarily not true. It's just not the first place I would look. A few weeks ago, I was reminded twice of the text of one of my favorite hymns, Once to Every Man and Nation by James Russell Lowell, which was written when the U.S. first annexed Texas, which was then a slave-holding state. It was quoted by Martin Luther King in his speech for the Ware Lectures, and also by the chaplain who opened the Senate impeachment hearings. The version in our hymnal has been modified a little, but in Lowell's poem, the first few lines say, "Once to every man and nation comes the moment to decide in the strife of truth with falsehood for the good or evil side." And later it goes on, "Then to side with truth is noble, while we share her wretched crust. Ere her cause bring fame and profit, and 'tis prosperous to be just. Then it is the brave man chooses, while the coward stands aside. May we stand with the brave." Happy Chalaka.
Thank you, Marianne. That was very thoughtful. Please join me in saying our covenant that we repeat every Sunday. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest of truth is our sacrament, and service is our prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve others in community to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with creation. Thus do we covenant with one another. A free and responsible search for truth and meaning means we don't have a catechism, a list of answers for every question. Each of us is responsible for finding our own truths and giving our life meaning, but not alone. We believe in searching in community, relying on the wisdom of one another's experiences as well as our own. I was once told in a community of ministers of many faiths that I create more questions than I answer when I speak during worship. I thanked them and said that I saw that as my job. That's probably why I'm comfortable asking you to consider questions before I speak every Sunday, so that your minds might be cracked open to hear the bigger questions that might arise as I speak. So today I'm asking you to consider the stages of your life and to ask yourself this: will you know when you have reached the end stage? No, the ultimate stage of your life. Will you know when there are no new truths to be discovered and you have milked your life of all the meaning you can? Oh yes, I'm going big today. This is the time we usually tell a story for all ages, but instead of a story today, I'm going to give you a philosophy for all ages. It comes from one of my favorite storytellers, thought-provokers, and wisdom seekers, Neil deGrasse Tyson. He wrote this: "We are all connected to each other biologically, to the earth chemically, to the rest of the universe atomically. The problem, often not discovered until late in life, is that when you look for things in life like love, meaning, motivation, it implies they are sitting behind a tree or under a rock. The most successful people in life recognize that in life they create their own love. They manufacture their own meaning. They generate their own motivation. For me, I am driven by two main philosophies: know more today about the world than I knew yesterday, and lessen the suffering of others." You'd be surprised how far that gets you. Isn't that a lovely thought? This is my first response to my own questions. I have to share with you what prompted all this philosophizing, this angst, this wrestling of which I speak. It began with an article in the weekly internet magazine I subscribed to from WebMD. It's a newsletter with tips about keeping healthy, reports on the latest medical research and discoveries about the human body and mind. I find it very enlightening and supportive. But this week, the lead story was titled, "Is There a Cure for Aging?" And I couldn't believe what I read. Here are some quotes from author Sonia Collins' story. Heart disease, cancer, diabetes, dementia. Researchers spend billions of dollars every year trying to eradicate these medical scourges. Yet even if we discover cures to these and all other chronic conditions, it won't change our ultimate prognosis: death. So far, I wasn't disturbed. What she said is true. Scientists are lengthening our lives with their research and offering us suggestions to better ways, healthier ways of living. A noble goal, I would say. But then Collins goes on to tell the heart of her story, that there are some scientists working not on how to cure diseases, but how to end aging. She wrote, "Fueled in part by $1 billion of investor money, scientists are attempting to reverse engineer your molecular biological clock. Their goal? To eliminate not merely diseases that kill people, but to prevent death itself." I have to admit the thought was so astounding it didn't really register until I got further into the article. It said that current conditions and attitudes toward health have helped people extend their healthy years so that people are reaching their 80s and 90s before getting the diseases that eventually cause their death. Living to 100 is no longer unusual. He's also said that certain drugs prescribed for diabetes and cancer are keeping people alive in good health for longer than they might have lived 50 years ago. And here's the clincher. These anti-aging researchers are saying that they believe that human lifespan might one day, soon, be extended to 1,000 years. Colin quoted one researcher who told her this: "We now die around 80. Getting an additional 35 years is relatively low-hanging fruit. I don't believe that is a fixed limit." He went on to say that Census Bureau projects that Americans born in 2060 should live an average of 85.6 years, up from the 78.7 in 2018. But he said, "My prediction tops that by a factor of about 50. I believe that the life expectancy for someone born in 2100 may well be 5,000 years. That's when my head exploded. That's when I realized there are crazier people than politicians in the world. Let me come back to it later while you let it sink in. I need to stop thinking about it for a minute. So my generosity report for now. Committees have turned in their budgets. So has the board, and so have I. The Stewardship Committee, headed by Dan Sexton, is putting together a budget for the fiscal year beginning July 1st. The campaign will begin March 1st and end mid-April. Voting on the budget will take place at the congregational meeting in May. I'm asking you to begin thinking of how far your generosity will extend this year. I know it's been a bad year for some of us, but we are hanging in there together so that when the pandemic allows us to meet in person again, we will have a church to meet in. I'm still committed to 10% of my salary, which also includes my housing allowance. You may recall that it used to be that most churches included in their remuneration a free house for the minister and his or her family to live in. When that tradition began to go by the wayside, the government granted a replacement allowance for housing costs to ministers because ministers of the day had built up no equity in housing when they lived in church manses, and they needed a boost to begin considering their housing the way other people did. So I'm looking at how we pay our staff because they have been the ones who have gotten us through this first year of pandemic lockdowns. We are going to need them more than ever as we struggle to get back our footing in what will be the new normal. Think about them with gratitude as you plan your pledges for the coming year. And I'll have more to say about that later in the month. My reading this morning is titled, When Does the End of Life Begin? It was written by Lola Bunch for the online magazine Next Avenue. She wrote, some life course stages have biological or legal markers. For example, adolescence generally correlates to puberty. In most states, people are legally considered adults at age 18, although the brain isn't finished growing until about age 25. Old age is typically thought to start at 65 when most people become eligible for Medicare and Social Security. End of life is different in that the starting point is unclear. We can't definitely state when the end of life stage starts because illness trajectories are uncertain. But the important thing is that once they start developing major chronic illnesses, people, whether they expect to continue living for 1 year or 4 years or 10 years, should think about how they want to live during the final stage and have that stage of life be as pain-free and peaceful as possible. She wrote, I'm not out to prove anything, but just really to reshape our thinking of how we can prepare for, rather than avoid, thinking about the inevitable. Let's have another hymn now. Let's sing number 86 in the book, Blessed Spirit of My Life.
Blessed Spirit of my life, give me strength through stress and strife. Help me live with dignity. Let me know serenity. Fill me with a vision. Clear my mind of fear and confusion. When my thoughts flow restlessly, let peace find a home in me. Blessed in a great mystery, hear the still small voice in me. Help me live my wordless creed as I comfort those in need. Fill me with compassion, be the source of my intuition. Then when life is done for me, let love be my legacy.
I put that reading and that hymn in here to ease my own mind. There are people in the world thinking more practical thoughts, more realistic thoughts, more morally acceptable thoughts about life and death than those who are considering the possibility of curing aging or beating death. But my mind isn't at ease. What are they thinking? Are they thinking at all? Oh, who doesn't consider now and then the thought of eliminating death, eradicating illness and suffering? But think it through. Even proposing that people can live to the age of 1,000 years. Let's not even go to the 5,000 before we get a reality check. It raises all kinds of questions. Here's one they might want to answer immediately. Where are we going to put everybody? I mean, the planet is already overcrowded. We have communities, even in first world countries, that are living on top of one another because of poverty, where children are starving to death because before they reach the age of 10, where crime is rampant because people have no way to get minimal support for their lives. If you and I and everyone alive today were to live to be 1,000 years old, where would we put the children who are being born today, tomorrow, 100 years from now? I don't remember who said it. I just read it recently, but I've forgotten the attribution. We have enough on this planet to support everyone's needs, but we don't have enough to support everyone's greeds. Beating death feels to me like another form of greed. Here's what would happen, and we've already experienced this in overcrowded countries somewhere in the world, somewhere in the past. The world would, in a matter of decades, become too crowded to support everyone's needs. Governments would have to find solutions for making it possible for certain members of the population to breed, as they did in the United States in the 1930s, when they secretly neutered people who had crime in their families, people who had poverty in their families, people who weren't as smart as those in power, and people who weren't as white as those in power. Or governments would have to punish people who had more than one child, or maybe require people to apply for having children before they could become parents. The death penalty would come back with a vengeance as a way of getting rid of the less desirable segments of society, and less desirable would take on new meaning, require stricter guidelines. Governments would send undesirable people into outer space to settle harsh planets, as England once sent their prison population to Australia, where they figured they would be unable to sustain themselves. Unimaginable steps would have to be taken to keep the population under control. Why, only the rich would be able to afford the treatments necessary to live to a ripe old age of 1,000 years. And just like fruit that gets overripe if left too long, the whole idea stinks. That doesn't even bring into account issues of increased pollution, land destroyed by fire and flood, issues we are already suffering because there are too many people doing too many dangerous things that will eventually make our planet entirely unlivable. Then where would these healthy 1,000-year-olds go? And here's the clincher for me. Many people, I started out to say most people, but I can't prove that. Many people alive today don't live fully the allotted time they have, whether it be 60 years or 70, whether they live the extended lives into their 80s, 90s, and 100s. Wouldn't it be better to teach the worldwide community to live richer, fuller lives rather than longer lives that contain the twin conflicts of greed and ennui? Well, more about that when I catch my breath. Every Sunday at about this time, we discuss the communion of names and milestones, the joys and concerns that people in this community have. I've heard reports of many people we know being without power for periods of time due to the power shortages brought on by the freaky weather conditions of this week. Worldwide news is reporting the single-digit temperatures experienced in Texas this week. People in communities in the north know how to deal with such annually recurring situations, but here, where it is an anomaly, we were not prepared for cold weather or snow on our streets and highways. Well, the worst of the weather is over for now, but not the worst of the recovery. If you know of anyone who needs help or had catastrophes because of these conditions, let us know or try to help them if you can. There is help all around us. And on a sad note, board member Christina Laquise lost her father to COVID-19 this week. Freddie Laquise was a Navy man, a great mechanical engineer, and a very loving father and grandfather, according to Christina. Because he died of COVID, he will be cremated. Please keep the family in your thoughts and prayers this week. Let us take a moment to consider what all of us are going through at this difficult time. Tragedy on top of tragedy, conflict on top of conflict. I said this week that I must have lived a good previous life because my karma held and my electricity stayed on and my water didn't freeze. But everybody wasn't that lucky. Let us consider those who have suffered more than their share this past year, this week in particular. Let's take a moment of silence to consider all of the stories that live in this community. And then Misha will give us an interlude of calming music. Thank you, Misha. Here's my third and final response to the explosion in my brain. If living forever is a voluntary pursuit, count me out. The future doesn't look promising from where I stand. The good news in all this, however, is that there are already people thinking ahead to help make people's lives more livable, more fulfilling, more productive, and less stressful. There are people who are looking at current longer lifespans and asking, how can we use this as a resource for the rest of the community? I'm seeing a rich culture of mentoring arising from the fact that people are living beyond what we have laughingly called retirement age, who are finding their wisdom and free time can be put to good and better use. I've already mentioned before that I'm part of a group based in Fort Worth called SAGE, an acronym for Seniors Assisting in Geriatric Education. Every medical training facility in the Fort Worth area now requires first or second year students to be involved as part of their education especially the part on how they might deal with people who are living longer and require different kinds of medical care and different attitudes from their care providers. Every semester, I have a team of 4 students representing one of 8 fields of health providers come to visit me, currently by Zoom, but previously by visits to my home. They practice on me and other mentors in SAGE the things that they will have to practice in their chosen field because there aren't enough geriatric professionals to provide care to all the people living longer than people lived just 30 or 40 years ago. They practice taking health histories, examining medications that may have been prescribed by different doctors who didn't know you were taking something else as well, talking about the issues that older people are concerned with, and they practice, most importantly of all, being concerned with wellness counseling, not just illness counseling. These are young people who think they are going to learn to practice 20th century medicine when 21st century elders have moved beyond those needs. Just as an aside, if you are interested in joining this movement and you are 65 years or older, go to sage.com and join this great movement. Talk about giving meaning to your life. And I recently discovered a new mentoring organization, less than a year old and already thriving in 40 states and 22 countries around the world, where elders are recruited to mentor children in areas of life and creativity where they are experienced or experts. Called Eldera, or the Era of Elders, because there are more and more of us, people 65 and older, we are being asked what field or interest we have that might support a young person's interests and learning how to live for the future. Parents of children who have an interest or a need in this area sign up their children for their own personal mentor. I joined saying I would like to mentor a potential writer if I could. I have taught adults how to write, and my own experiences as the writer, editor, and minister, I thought, would give me the ability to support a young person in their search for a future that includes this form of creativity and outreach. And I was matched with a 9-year-old South Korean boy named Noah, who currently lives in Denver, Colorado, where his father is going to school for a year. And I will be able to continue to meet with him when he moves back to South Korea. We meet once a week on Zoom, and we are getting to know one another. We are now at a stage where we can tease one another, and we laugh together a lot. Noah is delightfully smart and cool. Like most South Koreans, he is taught to speak both Korean and English from the time he begins school. This past week, we found riddles to try to stump one another. Most weeks, we both follow the same writing assignment, an essay or a story. Now, I don't correct his writing like a teacher might. I simply encourage it. I tell him what I liked best about it and how he might broaden his skills. And I am learning too. You bet I am. But mentoring aside, I ask myself what else I can do to help people who are already grown to live more fully, not just work, retire, and rock on the front porch. There are thankfully already groups who are considering that. One of those groups is the UUA, the Unitarian Universalist Association of Churches. I came across one class designed for people who have made no plans to continue to grow in their retirement. It's called Hindsight, Humor, and Hope. It focuses on these 3 areas, looking back and finding what you've already learned from both the positive and negative interactions of your life. That's the hindsight. Finding signs of the good life in your own. It often takes a sense of humor to realize where life has led you and what it's taught you. And finally, looking ahead because you're not dead yet. I love this quote I found at the end of the class. If you're lucky, you'll survive youth and middle age, and then you'll find out what good living really is. I subscribe fully to that philosophy. I think because there is this new period called extreme age, living beyond what was expected when we were born, There's a lot of study about what people might do when they reach retirement years and find there are more of them than they expected or planned for. There is also this truth that we have grown up in a culture of ageism, where being young, staying young, and acting and looking young were people's major concerns when looking ahead to their later lives. That is changing because thanks to the baby boomers, there are so many more of us, and we are acting on our own behalf to support end-of-life rights the way we have supported rights for women, gays, and ethnic minorities. Here is a part of the introduction to the class, Hindsight, Humor, and Hope. Heads up, elders. It is time to consider the richness of elderhood. Focus on how to age well, making the best of your wisdom, spirit, and connections. Elderhood brings a gift of time for thinking and reflecting, for integrating what we bring from our deep self and our lived experience. Embracing our own wisdom will help us stay focused and connected to the preciousness of life and help us deal with the fast-forward life around us. To be more than a physical body is our birthright. Each of us is also a spiritual being who deep within holds faith, hope, and love. Using our spiritual energy and compassionate awareness as tools, we can proudly embrace the t-shirt slogan that says, "Aging is the ultimate extreme sport." And as you may have heard, it's not a sport for sissies. One of my SAGE team members recently sent me information about a new online organization called the Senior Planet. It's at seniorplanet.com if you're interested. Here is their pledge. I will stay curious because learning is a gift. I will stay open because an inclusive community is richer for it. I will stay engaged because every life is to be lived in full. I will stay kind because each of us deserves respect and compassion. And I will leave Senior Planet and our community a better place than I found it. Oh yes, I joined. You can join for free and benefit from all their work and recommendations, or you can pledge whatever you can afford, $5, $500, $5,000. They ask for volunteers to support their events, much like a church community does. I believe in communities, which, heads up, will be my topic next week, unless something else explodes my brain before then. But my final question this morning is this: why do we have to wait until we are seniors to be encouraged to live fully? That's the most important question I came to when I began to gather the pieces of my exploded brain together. Why aren't we encouraging people to live lives of imagination, seeking, risk-taking, excitement over new ideas, supporting others in mutual respect? What if we took on as a life-giving task the work of showing others how to live full and rewarding lives? What would it look like if we encouraged children and youth to begin exploring their own lives, thinking beyond the boxes of issues and ethics included in their early indoctrinations? What if we all became mentors to one another, whatever our own age? What would it look like? Well, here is my manifesto. Know yourself. Understand why you do the things you do and believe the things you believe. And you can do this by talking freely with others, by journaling, or through therapy. It is a lifelong task because with any luck, you will continue to change as you continue to evolve and grow. Second, take the risks of imagination. If you can't imagine what lies ahead of you in your life, you will never be able to take the risk of doing something different, of growing into your full potential. Third, don't regret your unlived life. Keep learning, keep changing. Begin to live fully now and make up for waiting for someone else to make your life better, more exciting, or more challenging. Give back to the stage before you. Don't get stuck just with peers. They are important and they are supportive, but Add to your teachers and mentors, those older than you and those younger. That way you don't ever grow old. You simply keep aging grandly. You're always learning, and you are always leading. Live fully at every stage of your life. That will look different to different people, which makes the effort even more exciting and rewarding. And keep evolving, keep growing, keep telling, keep knowing, keep harvesting, keep sowing, keep flying, keep flowing. Well, I could go on with this rhyming for a long time, but I think you get the idea. What would you add to these suggestions? What will you write in your manifesto? Let us come to a close of our service today with a final hymn, number 343, A Fire Mist and a Planet.
A fire mist and a planet, a crystal and a cell, a starfish and a saurian, and caves where ancients dwelt. The sense of law and beauty, a face turned from the sod. Some call it evolution, and people call it God. Gaze on the far horizon, the infinite sky, the ripe, rich tints of cornfields and wild geese sailing high, and over high and lowland, the charms of goldenrod. Some people call it autumn, and others call it God. Like tide on crescent sea beach, when moon so new and thin, into our hearts' high yearnings come welling, surging in. Come from the mystic ocean, whose rim no foot has trod. Some people call it longing, and others call it God. A century lone and frozen, a mother starved for her brood, and Socrates' dread hemlock, and Jesus on the rood, and millions who through nameless the straight-hand pathway trod. Some call it consecration, and others call it God.
I hope I've given you a lot to think about today. I want to extinguish our chalice, which has flamed for the symbol of community, which we long to join together again in person, but for now continue on this separate path. Benediction was written by Donna Markova, and she said this: I will not die an unlived life. I will not live in fear or failing or catching fire. I choose to inhabit my days, to allow my living to open me, to make me less afraid, more accessible. Loosen my heart until it becomes a wing, a torch, a promise. I choose to risk my significance, to live so that which came to me as seed goes to the next in blossom, and that which came to me as blossom goes on as fruit. So may it be in all our lives. Misha?